You've probably seen those incredible photos, right? Massive solar farms just sprawling across the desert. But have you ever stopped to wonder what it actually takes to build one? I'm telling you, the journey from a patch of empty land to a clean energy powerhouse is a long one, packed with some seriously complex planning and engineering. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how it gets done. I mean, just look at this. This is the end goal. Thousands upon thousands of photovoltaic panels, all soaking up the sun and turning it into enough electricity to power entire cities. It is an absolutely remarkable feat of modern engineering, and obviously a huge piece of the puzzle in shifting to renewable energy. But getting to this point, well, that's the real story. Because what you see here, as clean and simple as it looks, is hiding an astonishing amount of complexity. It's this multi-year gauntlet of financial hurdles, regulatory mazes, and tough physical challenges that starts way, way before the first shovel ever even hits the ground. Okay, so let's start with phase one, what I like to call the invisible work. This is where a project is often won or lost, and it all happens on paper. Before a single solar panel is ordered, before a single bolt is turned, there is a mountain of planning you have to conquer. It all kicks off with these three absolutely critical steps. First step, the feasibility study. This basically asks, is this even a good idea? Is it possible? Then you move into development, where that idea gets fleshed out into a super detailed, bankable plan. And finally, financial closure. This is the moment of truth, when the investors and the banks finally give the project a green light. That feasibility study, it's an incredibly meticulous process. You have to prove this whole thing is viable by answering some really crucial questions. Like, how much sun does this spot actually get? What's the best technology to use here? Can we even connect to the grid? And what's that going to cost? And, maybe most importantly, is it actually going to make money? And one of the very first big decisions a developer has to make is this classic trade-off. Do you go with the more expensive, high-efficiency panels? That way you save on land and infrastructure costs. Or do you opt for the cheaper panels, which means you're going to need a much, much bigger physical footprint? There's no single right answer. It's this careful balancing act between cost and space. And then, oh boy, then comes the permit maze. And I promise you, that is not an exaggeration. You're not just asking one person for permission here. You are navigating this incredibly complex web of local, regional, and national groups. Everyone from aviation authorities who are worried about glare, to archaeological departments making sure you're not about to build on top of some ancient historical site. Getting all these approvals can literally take years. All right, so once the financing is finally secured and all those permits are in hand, the project gets to move from paper to reality. This is the great solar build, the really dramatic physical process of turning all those blueprints into a functioning power plant. And this phrase just perfectly illustrates the scale of the task. You're not just putting up some panels, you're building access roads, you're building security systems, substations, control rooms, you're laying miles and miles of underground cables. The logistical coordination is just immense. And during this phase, 1,000 different things can go wrong. Maybe a survey missed something about the soil, and now your foundations won't hold. You might start digging and find contaminated soil from some previous land use. And sometimes, it's the really small things, like a worker just using a torque wrench incorrectly, that can cause these huge, costly failures down the line. And the consequences of those problems are very, very real. Just take a look at this case study from a plant in India. A project that was supposed to take 38 weeks got hammered by monsoon rains and design flaws, and it ended up taking a full year. That is a huge, costly delay that eats directly into the project's bottom line. So after months, or maybe even years, construction is finally done. You'd think the work is over, right? Well, not even close. Now the long game begins. We're talking decades of operation and maintenance to make sure this plant performs exactly the way it promised to. Before the plant can officially start selling power, it has to pass a whole series of really rigorous commissioning tests. You can think of it like a final exam. First, a visual inspection, just to make sure everything is physically safe. Then, electrical tests, to make sure it's robust. And finally, after it's connected to the grid, performance tests to prove it actually delivers the power it's supposed to. Okay, so once it's operational, a whole new battle begins, the fight against the elements. It might seem like a small detail, but a simple layer of dust or pollen or bird droppings, the industry has a word for it, they call it soiling, can seriously slash a panel's output and cost the plant a significant amount of money. So how do operators measure the plant's health? Well, they use this key metric called the performance ratio, or PR.
This basically tells you how efficiently the plant is converting sunlight into usable electricity after you account for all the real-world things that get in the way, like energy loss to heat, that dust on the panels, or even resistance in the cables.
So, what's a good number? Well, it's never going to be 100% because of all those avoidable real-world losses we just talked about. But a well-designed, well-maintained solar plant should be hitting an annual average performance ratio of around 80%. Anything in that ballpark is considered a real benchmark for success. And keeping that PR high requires constant work. The operations and maintenance team has a truly endless to-do list, scheduling regular cleanings for the modules, keeping all the vegetation from casting shadows, checking thousands and thousands of electrical connections, and servicing critical hardware like the inverters that convert DC power to AC.
Which brings us to the big question, right? After all of this, the complex planning, the risky construction, the endless maintenance, why do developers and investors even go through with it? What is the big picture payoff?
Well, because a successful project brings a whole wave of benefits. It creates local jobs both during construction and during operation. It bolsters a nation's energy security and cuts down on expensive fuel imports. It generates new tax revenue for communities. And, of course, it finds a productive use for land that might otherwise just be sitting empty. So, we understand the process. The blueprint is there. We know how to take a solar project from just an idea to a powerhouse. The real question this leaves us with is a global one. As we face the urgency of climate change, can we navigate this incredibly complex process quickly enough and at a large enough scale to build the clean energy future we so desperately need?